Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jen from That Mama Book Nook, and today we are going to do my June wrap-up video. This wrap-up video is coming a little bit later than I would have liked, but I really wanted to get that July TBR video out, but better late than never. So here is what I read in June. The first book that I read was My Royal Showmance by Lexi Blake. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is a contemporary romance. This story follows Annika, who works for a production company. She's fairly high up on the chain, but her boss asks her to take a lower level position on a reality show set to kind of investigate some allegations against the director before they go all in with him on a bigger show. She reluctantly agrees, and on the very first night she's there, she's supposed to just kind of be, I forget what the term is, you know, one of the backstage people just like helping out, kind of doing, I feel like in the medical community we just call it like scut work. One of the contestants ends up leaving, and they think Annika would be a perfect shoo-in. So they throw her in. They're like, don't worry about it. The king's going to cut you on the first night, and then you'll be back to doing the behind the scenes work. Again, reluctantly, she agrees. She really didn't have much of a choice here. And when she goes to meet the king, I should explain that this reality show is a bachelor type reality show, but instead of just like your average guy, he is a king of a very tiny country in Europe. When she goes to meet him, she realizes that it's this guy that she actually met last night, and they really hit it off, but he kind of, not really flaked, but kind of called it off before it led to anything too much more, because he didn't explain it to her, but because he was going on this reality show to meet his future wife. Of course he doesn't cut her, and things kind of escalate from there. I really enjoyed this one. I have been looking for a reality show book. I don't know why, I just have been in the mood for one. I've read a couple other ones that weren't really hitting, and finally this one I was like, yes, I am getting the reality show vibes that I've been looking for. I loved the behind the scenes parts. I loved the, you know, on-camera parts. I really loved the banter and the romance that was developing between the king, his name's Luca, and Annika. I loved the other contestants. They were really funny. You know, they're all playing their character parts. A lot of them were actresses, as you would often see on these reality shows. And I thought the author also did a really nice job with handling the allegations about the director. I don't want to spoil it and go into it too much, but I thought the author did a really nice job with that. The only, I think, like really nitpicky thing was in the beginning, the king was very reluctant. Even though he like clearly had chemistry with Annika from like this previous date, he was still treating it very much as a business proposition. You know, yes, I'm going to keep you, you'll make it to the end, you'll make a great queen for my country, I don't do love. That part was like just a tiny bit annoying to me, but overall I still really enjoyed it. And I had no idea, but this is actually the second book in a series of standalones. It is about a group of 3 friends who all have career goals, but also have agreed to always remain friends no matter what. So each book follows a different one of these friends. So this one obviously was following Annika, but you do meet the other friends in the book, so I'm excited to go back to the first one and get a little bit more about that friend's story, and I will definitely be looking out for the third one. Definitely a great found family aspect between the friends, and all these are strong, career-oriented women. Then also in the month of June, I participated in the Amazing Readathon hosted by Bree from Four Paws in a Book. This was the first time that I have participated in that readathon, but it was so much fun. I was on Team Fiction, and we actually ended up winning the readathon, so that was really cool. But so some of these books were on my TBR, but also, you know, I tried to get as many as I could to fulfill prompts My Royal Showmance did not, because I had read most of it actually in May, so I was only finishing up in June, and I definitely had less than 50%. But the first book that I read for the readathon was Tomorrow is for the Brave by Kelly Bowen. This was, for our first destination, was Toronto, Canada, and the prompt was that it had to be a book that we did not buy. So this book was actually sent to me from Booksparks in exchange for a review. Definitely did not buy it, and I was really looking forward to reading this one. This is a historical fiction, so it also was like extra points for my team genre. This book takes place during World War II, and it actually is based off of a real World War II veteran named Susan Travers. She was an ambulance driver, and her story was really, really cool. Note in the back from the author is definitely not to be missed, and of course, like, I immediately had to go learn more about her. But the character in this story is called Violet St. Croix. She kind of lives a life of luxury. She is engaged to be married to a man who is very controlling. Her father is also very controlling. Violet somewhat goes along with it all, but you can definitely tell with her friends and with her, there's something missing. There's something missing in her life, and she seems bored. She does have this hobby of cars, which is not very ladylike, but her husband and father kind of allow it. Or sorry, not her husband, her fiance. They're not married yet. Her fiance and father, allow it because, they just give her that little bone, throw her a little bone. She eventually meets George, which is a woman, short for Georgette, and George's brother Henry, and they are joining the war effort. And Violet decides that she's going to join too, after kind of some revealing information about her fiance and her father. She calls off the wedding, and despite their protests, she joins as well. Now, they would not let her join as an ambulance driver, so she joins as a nurse. She's like, I'm a terrible nurse. But she joins anyway and does her best, but eventually an opportunity does present itself, and she really is a hero while driving. And then from then on in the rest of the war, she gets to be an ambulance driver for pretty high up generals. The war effort takes her to the Middle East. It takes her to North Africa, so that was really interesting. And she's put in a lot of really dangerous situations. And on top of that, there is a spy among them. So a lot going on. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. World War II historical fiction is one of my favorites. I have read a lot of it, but it sounds weird to say, but it is like a little bit of a comfort genre to me. I just really enjoy it. I'm just so in awe of the brave men and women during that time, despite all the awful things going on. So as I said, I obviously loved this one. I have never read a World War II historical fiction novel that was set in the Middle East or Africa, so that was really interesting. Violet was such a likable character. I loved the ambulance driver and just like then driver in general. That was a really neat. You hear lots about the nurses and things like that, and I love that perspective too as a fellow nurse, but the ambulance driver piece was really neat. I also really liked the other characters in the story. George and Henry were both really great. Some of the other supporting mostly men, really. It was really Violet and surrounded by men most of the time were interesting. The spy aspect was a really interesting twist in there as well. Not a spoiler, it's well known from the beginning and from even the synopsis that there is a spy, but you just don't find out who it is. The writing was absolutely beautiful. I really felt like I was transported from start to finish, and again in these areas that I have not read a lot about in the past. So there are so many amazing historical figures, and I'm so glad their stories are being shared, and I really enjoyed learning more about this one. Then the next destination in the Amazing Readathon was Buenos Aires, and we had to read a book with dual POV. It could not be more or less, exactly two. So I read Forbidden King by Laura Pavlov. This was another advanced reader copy that I received. I was really excited to be able to include that in the Amazing Readathon. This is the third book in the Magnolia Falls series. I have talked about this book a little bit in previous videos, but this is Kingston and Sailor's story. The Magnolia Falls series is a small town series that follows each of this group of 5 guys, friend group, and each book focuses on a different guy. So this was Kingston. The first book was Romeo, and the second book was River. Now we're at Kingston. Nash and Hayes will be next. Anyway, so Kingston works for a construction company. He actually owns it with one of the other guys as well. And Sailor is Hayes' younger sister, and she is back in town and opening up a romance bookstore. So that's always fun for readers too. But they have known each other since they were kids. Sailor and Hayes had like a lot of hard stuff going on in their family. Kingston honestly had some hard stuff going on in his family as children too. And Sailor actually lived with Kingston for a little while when they were younger. Nothing happened, romantically, but they were there for each other, and so emotionally they've been tied for a really, really long time. When they're back in town, there is definitely some immediate attraction there, but it's Hayes' little sister. They're, kind of a little bit of a forbidden love going on. You're not allowed to date your brother's sisters, but eventually they can't help it. They kind of set some boundaries around it. They do their best, but they just cannot help falling for each other. I really, really adore this series. I'm having so much fun with each of the guys. I also gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. I have really liked Kingston from book 1. He is just that fun, lovable guy in the friend group. He's super funny. He was not a player, but a little bit, just wasn't settling down, but it was obvious because he was waiting for Sailor. He was just really likable from the beginning, and I really enjoyed getting to hear more about his story as well as get to know Sailor a little bit. Their love was just very, very sweet. Because they have been friends for so long, they have a lot of inside, not jokes, but meaningful things that just the two of them know. Dandelions is a big theme throughout the book, and it's really special. Both the first 2 books were more of an enemies to lovers story, so it was nice to get a little bit of a different trope with a childhood friends to lover, a little bit of forbidden love, brother's best friend's sister, and also just that micro trope of it's always been you. I am a hopeless romantic at heart, so that was really nice to read. I definitely recommend picking up this one. You don't necessarily have to have read the other 2, but you'll obviously just know which couples are already coupled up if you read them out of order. But I definitely recommend reading it. The chat groups among the guys are really fun, and it's just a really fun, easy to read series. Then our next destination for the Amazing Readathon was off to Berlin, and we had to read a book with movement in the cover, and this one ended up being a little bit tricky because I had really been trying to fit in my TBR books into the prompts, and this was the one prompt that I did not have anything that fit, so I had to pull a book off my shelf, and I ended up reading Falling by T.J. Newman. This book is a thriller, and it is about Bill, who is a pilot, and he is supposed to have the day off, but he gets a call from his boss that he needs to go in and fly this special flight, and when the boss calls, you go. When he starts this flight, though, it quickly is apparent that it is not a true flight. There are terrorists both on board and a terrorist at his home. And his choice either is he crashes the plane or his family is killed. So this is, you know, an impossible decision for a pilot with a family. He has a wife and 2 children. He has to make a lot of decisions on how to handle this. This was a very quick, fast-paced thriller. It was an entertaining read. I did only give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. As I said, it was fun, but it was a little bit predictable. You kind of knew what was going to happen. There was a lot of coincidences in the plot I felt like they were just there to kind of move the plot along. A lot of people in the right place at the right time, and not a lot of surprises, but it was still a good read. I thought that the author did a really nice job of capturing the fear and the hope and all the emotions of kind of the other people, you know, the passengers, the flight attendants, the other people on the plane. That was a really well done. I'm almost positive that the author used to be a flight attendant, so she definitely has firsthand knowledge of, you know, all the workings. So that was really well done. But again, just an easy, fun read to fill that prompt. Then the next destination was Paris, and we were supposed to read a book that had won an award, and we had also come in last on the previous leg, so our punishment was that it had to be a book that won an award, but it had to be a book that was a host favorite that had won an award. And I was going to read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, but at that point in the month there was no way that I was going to finish it on time. We were already several legs past this. So at that point the fast forward had already come into play, so I used a fast forward. So I do plan to read that book relatively soon, but it just wasn't going to happen in June. But then we ended up in Cape Town, and we had to read a book with nature on the cover. And so that's when I picked up Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I have talked a lot about this book in previous videos, so I'm going to try to be quick, but just in case this is the first one that you are checking out, this follows Emma and Justin. Justin posts a Am I the Asshole post on Reddit. If you've seen those, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you know, there's this whole big backstory, but through it all, he explains that he has this dating curse on him, that whoever he dates, when they eventually break up, that person then goes on to find their soulmate. Justin then is left alone again. Emma sees this post and says, hey, I have that same curse. And they start chatting, and they decide, well, what if we dated each other and then broke up? Would we then break the curse and then go on to find our soulmates? They live in different states, but luckily Emma is a traveling nurse, and she and her best friend Maddie cancel their plans to go to Hawaii and instead go to Minnesota, where Justin lives, and go there for the summer and decide to date. They end up making all these rules about how many dates they need to do, when they're allowed to kiss, and such in order to make it be official, to be able to break this curse. It's very funny. There is a lot going on in both Emma and Justin's backstory lives, both involving their mothers and family. Emma especially has a lot of trauma in her life, so I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, but I definitely would recommend checking trigger warnings. But if you feel comfortable and in a good headspace to read it, I highly recommend picking it up. I absolutely loved Justin, the male main character. He comes up with such cute date ideas, and he always sends out a poll ahead of time to see, what to do. They were just so fun, so creative. He is very silly. The whole Am I the A post was about naming his dog after his best friend. His dog is actually kind of ugly cute, because his friend was kind of a jerk, but he's doing it like, you know, in like a funny, spiteful way. And it was just like a really funny story overall. I actually really love when characters in books have a lot of complicated emotional stuff going on. Also, because that's life, you know, maybe not always as heavy as Emma and Justin's were, but they definitely, you know, it's not always simple. So I thought Abby Jimenez did a really nice job addressing everything that was going on and still building this really beautiful romance between the two of them. Also, the side characters were awesome. Maddie, the best friend, was so great, and then you got to meet Justin's siblings, who were also just a really nice addition to the cast. This is also apparently I think the third book in the series, but this is my first Abby Jimenez, so I guess there were a lot of cameos and Easter eggs from previous books, so I will have to go back and read them because I am definitely a fan. Then our next stop on the Amazing Readathon was Antananarivo. Not 100% sure I pronounced that place right, but I think it's at least close. And we had to read a book with religion. I read Unsold by Will White. This was a book that I completely forget how the series came on my radar. It is a pretty highly rated book on Goodreads, but it's not one that I ever see on Bookstagram or friends talking about. So again, not sure how it got on my radar, but it kind of came up on my TBR and I decided to go for it. This book follows Linden. I should mention maybe beforehand that this is a Chinese progressive fantasy called, I'm probably going to butcher this too, Shanxia, and which is I guess like a martial arts and mythical fantasy. So this is a genre that I have never tried before. But anyway, back to the synopsis. This follows Linden. In this community, when a child is between the ages of 6 to 8 years old, they are called on to find their path. So they dip their hands into this sacred water and it tells them which path they are leading. I think there's about 4 or so. When Linden does that, nothing happens and he is deemed to be unsold. This is not good in his community. They do not let unsold practice any path. He is very much an outcast. Certain events happen and he ends up being set on this like pretty epic journey. Linden does not use this handicap to hold him back. If anything, it propels him forward and he, you know, finds loopholes, he uses a little bit of trickery, and honestly just pure determination and bravery to move forward. After reading this book, I honestly had no idea how I felt about it because I felt it was a very well written book. It was really interesting and very unique, nothing like I had ever read before, but I just didn't feel like I loved it, and I really had to sit with that for a while before I was able to, you know, give it a rating. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. What I kind of came to the conclusion was that, as I said, it was unique, it was interesting, the character of Linden was likable. He, you know, it's a really great underdog story, which I really enjoy, but I just found that I didn't really care about his story, and I didn't like him that much, even though I should have. There was nothing wrong with him. And I think it just was not a book for me. I am really, really glad that I picked it up. I feel like I grew as a reader because I read outside of my comfort genre, and I, you know, have no regrets reading it. But I do not think at this time I will be continuing on with the series. It is a 12-book series, and I just don't feel like I'm interested enough. There is a ton of action. There is a really unique magic system. The world building was really interesting because it was kind of immersive. They don't really explain the world building to you at all. You're just kind of thrown in. And by the end of it, I did understand the terms that they were using, even though I didn't really have like a real definition for it. So that was interesting. But yeah, I don't think, never say never, but I don't think I will be continuing on with the series at this time. But if that stuff sounds interesting to you, I definitely recommend picking it up. I do think it was really well written. Then our next destination was Seoul, and this had to be a book with a source of light on the cover. We also came in last on this one, and it had to be a book 100 pages more than the last book we had read. Luckily, Unsold was a fairly short book, so it was not hard to find a book that was 100 pages more. So I ended up picking up What the River Knows. However, I ended up using a fast forward for this one as well because I was not going to finish it. I am reading it and will finish it in July, so you will definitely hear more about that book on my July wrap-up. Then we were off to Bangkok, and we had to read a book with at least 5 colors on the cover. And I chose The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald for this prompt. This was the book for my Goodreads Best Books Ever Challenge, so I was happy that I was able to include this in the Amazing Readathon. I feel like everyone probably knows the synopsis of The Great Gatsby, but just really briefly, this follows Nick Carraway in the 1920s. He is in New York for the summer, and he is living right next door to Jay Gatsby, who throws these really extravagant parties, and Nick is certainly very curious about him. He does get invited to one of these parties with his quasi-love interest, Jordan Baker, and they get to meet Jay Gatsby and brought into the inner circle a little bit for the summer. We also meet Daisy Buchanan, who is the love interest of Gatsby, although she's married to someone else. So then we're kind of taken on this chaotic ride for the summer with like infidelity and again kind of these extravagant parties of the 1920s. There's a lot of privilege and also some tragedy. I read this book in high school technically, but I have not picked it up since. It is interesting to go back and reread some of these classics as an adult. I definitely didn't appreciate it as much in high school. I still didn't love it. I did give it 4 out of 5 stars this read time. I do like the setting of the 1920s. I think that was just a really interesting time between, the fashion and the parties and the statuses and all the things. That piece was interesting, and I thought the picture that Fitzgerald painted was well done. I also thought the themes of both the ideals and the criticism of the American dream were well done in this book. Definitely went over my head a little bit more when I was in high school, but I thought the way they kind of sacrificed their morals even to achieve the American dream was done creatively through the writing. I just didn't like the characters that much. I don't really care for books about just these vapid characters of status who the kind of like the rich and famous. I think that's why I prefer, going way back to the first book that I talked about, like I prefer like the reality TV. I feel like they're just like a little bit more down to earth, a little bit more interesting. Just like celebrities, like I find them kind of boring. And I know that was like kind of done on purpose. The upper class is supposed to be painted as this class that really like doesn't care about others, but I just really still didn't enjoy reading that much about them. Only 2 more stops. So we next went to Auckland. We had to read a book with water on the cover, and this was the last time I used the fast forward. I did end up using it quite a bit. If you weren't involved with the Amazing Readathon, you did like need to use like points to be able to fast forward. So by the end, the last leg, I did have to swim or walk to get back to LA, but it was worth it to actually get to complete the readathon with my team. But anyway, in Auckland we had to read a book with water on the cover. I was going to read A River Enchanted. I fast forwarded it, but similar to What the River Knows, I am reading that now and it will be done in July, so you will hear more about my thoughts on that in my July TBR. So then our final leg of the Amazing Readathon was back to Los Angeles, and we had to read a book that we wanted to see adapted into a movie. And I read an advanced reader copy of The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars as well. This is another fun romance. This follows another Emma, and she is a screenwriter, kind of a wannabe screenwriter, and she gets a call from her high school boyfriend, best friend, and to kind of have the opportunity of a lifetime to come out to LA and work for her idol. His name is Charlie, and he's a very famous screenwriter. She's reluctant at first because she does have a lot of going on with her family, but she eventually agrees. She goes out to meet him and finds out that not everything is as it seems. He is this really grumpy screenwriter, and he's written this terrible rom-com and doesn't want to work with her, and even when he eventually is convinced to write it, he plans to half do it. And Emma overhears this. She sets out to kind of prove him wrong, both that she's a great screenwriter and that romance and rom-coms are alive and well. They certainly develop a really, really strong friendship, some chemistry there, of course, as well. I really enjoyed this one. This was my first Catherine Center. I loved the plot of this one. It was so fun. The banter between the two main characters was excellent. They were really funny. I did just find Emma a little bit annoying, and I'm interested to see if it's Catherine Center's writing or if it was just how she portrayed this character. Maybe some of you will know what I'm talking about, but every time Emma talked, she had to give 3 examples to explain what she was talking about. Every single time. And I was kind of like, okay, we get it. Like, you don't need to give 3 examples every time. It definitely went well with the personality that she was, portraying, but I found it a little bit grating at times. It was definitely a slow burn, and sometimes I found Charlie's character to be a little bit frustrating also, but overall just a really fun, enjoyable read. Then the last book that I read for June, this was not for any prompt. I also received this book from Booksparks, and that was Pardon My Frenchie by Farah Rashan. This book was so cute. This follows Ashanti and Thad. Ashanti owns a dog boarding business, and Thad is a veteran who has retired from the military and wants to open up kind of this all-encompassing bar and other businesses for a place for veterans to be able to gather amongst friends. But part of the reason why he's also back here is that his grandmother has had to move into assisted living, and she can't take her dog Puddin with her. So he is now the owner of Puddin. He is not a dog person. Puddin is a loyal client of Ashanti's business, which is called the Barkingham Palace, which is also just so cute. Ashanti has a dog named Duchess, and Duchess and Puddin are besties. There is definitely some headbutting between Ashanti and Thad, dog lover, not dog lover. Puddin is still eventually going there. One day, they are caught on this doggy camera. Duchess and Puddin are caught having a Lady and the Tramp moment with a dog biscuit, and it goes absolutely viral, and that sends Ashanti and Thad on this kind of wild journey to promote their respective businesses, kind of riding the coattails of their famous dogs, but definitely are attracted to each other, and their friendship and relationship starts to build as the story goes on, and it's very sweet. I also gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. If you are a dog lover, definitely pick this up. There was so many cute dog moments in this book. I loved the character of Ashanti. She is a strong, business-oriented woman. She also is the sole guardian of her twin teenage sisters, and there's like a whole backstory involving that as well, which, as I mentioned, similar with Abby Jimenez's book, I love when there's just like this complicated emotional life event as well as the romance in these type of books. So that was really well done. Thad kind of wasn't like my favorite at first, but he definitely grows on you as the story goes on, and he does have an interesting backstory as well. So both really great characters to read about. Another slow burn, but you're rooting for them the whole time. And that is it for my June wrap-up. Let me know if you read any of these books in June, or leave a book in the comments that you read, even if it's a different one. And if you are not feeling super chatty, leave a dog emoji for the Pardon My Frenchie book, and I will see you on my next video. Bye!